Well, thanks, Maria. Well, it's really my pleasure to be here with all you guys, and especially with Phil and Katie. This is Phil Linhares, who was gallery director at the San Francisco Art Institute, and Katie Hood Morgan, who was also gallery director at the San Francisco Art Institute. And an email I just read from Katie, she said, "This is great. We kind of bookend the
Mhm.
gallery directors at the place," and that's really true. As
Yeah.
much as they had exhibitions going back to 1871, the gallery director thing was always a little bit elusive. Like Fred Martin kind of did it for 10 years or so as the art bank person and in charge of all sorts of different exhibition type things, but it was always done sort of by committee. But then Phil started to do it at some point in the 1960s, and I probably should have looked up exactly when, but you can probably tell it or make
67.
something else in
67.
67.
Mhm.
And your exhibitions, and maybe it was the Times, Phil, maybe it was you, maybe it was the Art Institute, but they really were dynamic. And it
Mhm.
turns out, as we look through the archives, they were pretty damn interesting the entire time. But the '60s were really, really interesting, and we'll go over
Yeah.
some things and ask questions about them. And then Katie's time period at the other end of that bookend is about as fascinating a time period, also with those exhibitions and how they mingled with students and faculty and everything else too. So it's really fun to be with you too. And I guess we should start out with you, Phil, and I should just ask you, and you can take off and go in any direction you want. And we have some images to show too, if Maria wants to show those, and talk about you starting at the Art Institute, how you got there and who you worked with and things you did. And oh, one thing to reference that I always forget, and you probably forget a little bit too, Phil, is that when you started there, the gallery was what is now known or what wound up becoming the Diego Rivera Gallery. It was
Yeah.
before the 1969 building was built. And
Yeah.
one of my questions I do have for you, and we're trying to track down when this happened, and we think we found it the other day, is when the term Diego Rivera Gallery started. And we think it's at some point in the 1970s. And
Something like
before that, it was really just called something else.
the
So
gallery. Yeah.
anyway, should we show a picture of Phil from a couple years ago and start with that, Phil, or
Go
do you want
ahead.
to?
Okay.
Oh, there we are.
There. God.
You should have worn that sweater and jacket today.
Yeah, right. My God. Must have been a cold day. I probably had my Clark's desert boots on too. Yeah. A lot of hair. Those were the days.
Who hired you, Phil?
I was hired by Fred Martin, but it was a process that went through the artist committee. And on the artist committee, which was kind of the supervisorial committee for exhibitions, there were a bunch of old timers, and my champions were Mark Adams and a couple of teachers I had at CCAC. But what really happened was that after I got my MFA at CCAC in about 64, I had odd jobs, and but I joined the San Francisco Art Association, which was a group managed by Fred Martin. So Fred Martin was running the gallery and running the Art Association and doing exhibitions. And so that's how I got to know Fred. So that was probably 64, 60, 65, right in there. In fact, Fred did an exhibition, including one of my paintings that was illustrated in one of the very first Art Forum magazines.
Wow.
And that was when the Art Forum was in San Francisco. But nonetheless, I got the job based on a job that I had at the Oakland Museum. Uh, in early 67, I got a job as curatorial assistant at the Oakland Museum for Tom Fry, who was the history department chief curator. With my art background, I kind of hoped that I would get into the art department, but they hired somebody and turned them into a registrar or something like that. And but with Tom in the history department, it was 2 years before we opened the Oakland Museum, 67, 8, and 9. Uh, we were making a lot of field trips up into the Sierra foothills, looking for mining equipment and dismantling an old cabin. And visiting a lot of people who were actually making a living uh, gold mining at the time. These old timers living in cabins up in the hills, and uh, gold was $33 an ounce, and the local uh, stores and gas stations would take gold dust for money for their gas and groceries. But it was a great experience, and I also was sent by Tom to call at the homes of people who were leaving, moving out, and they would call the museum and say, "We have a bunch of stuff." And so I was the guy that went up into the attic and unloaded everything and brought it in a panel truck to the museum and laid it out on the table. So anyhow, based on that brief experience um, at the Oakland Museum, I got the job as director of exhibition at the Art Institute and started in 67, August 67. Uh, and my first day, Fred Martin took me out to Stinson Beach to visit and to meet and visit Robert Hudson and Richard Shaw. They had a studio out there, and I guess they were living out there at the time. Uh, and the next day, he took me to see Wally Hedrick, who was living at his fix-it shop in San Geronimo. And I think the first show that I did was a Wally Hedrick exhibition called Here's Art Forum, which had the painting was kind of a takeoff on Art Forum magazine cover, and it now belongs to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, which we acquired through the Soapbox Derby funds. So anyhow, I was young and enthusiastic, and just started going on different ideas. And some of the shows that I did that first first couple of years, well, the Wally Hedrick show, this hot rod show that Tom Albright reviewed in the Rolling Stone magazine that had the naked picture of Yoko and John. And so it got lots and lots of attention. And I got a letter from Dorothy Miller, the curator from the Museum of Modern Art, inquiring about the show. But I didn't know who she was. Well, I probably knew she was from the letterhead, but I didn't respond. I was really stupid and didn't answer her, send in any pictures or anything like that. Uh, then uh, the this show was some people think it was the first conceptual art exhibition at the Art Institute. Um, and I was working with Eugenia Butler, a dealer in Southern California who handled the work or knew most of these people. I of course had to depend on the contacts of a lot of people, and she had a lot of contacts in this world. And she also had a daughter named Eugenia who participated in this. Uh, and it was a hassle to do because there must have been 15 or 18 artists, and so we had to do a different installation every 2 or 3 days. And some of them were really involved. Some involved putting blacking out the entire skylight of the gallery, which was really scary, with big volumes of black plastic on the roof there. And other required painting a wall or doing this or that. We sent an invitation to Ed Kainholz, but his proposal was to pound uh, six-penny nails into the floor, the entire floor at 1 inch apart, and we just couldn't do that. So we apologized. One of the most impressive things was by Eric Orr, who closed the gallery and got some big speakers and put them on the floor and covered them with concrete brick and turned on something like 27 cycles a second. And it was just this deep roar that you could hear from the outside. And, it just kind of shook the gallery the whole day. This thing roared on. So that was kind of an interesting show, but it was a lot of work, a lot of work. One artist wanted us to change all the lights in the gallery and so on. The Harry Hu show, I saw an ad in or a review in Art Forum, some black and white pictures, and I thought it was pretty interesting work. And so I called Don Baum, who was the head of the Hyde Park Art Center, who had done these shows, and he gave me Jim Nutt's phone number. And so I called Jim and I asked him if they'd like to have a show, and they said yes. And so Jim and the other four or the other three people uh, boxed up their work and sent it out, and they all came out. And some of the board members put them up in nice houses in Pacific Heights, Sally Lilienthal and others. And the public loved the show, and the students loved the show, and the faculty hated it. Um, Especially Bruce McGaw and Julius Hatofsky accused me of trying to undermine the discipline they were trying to instill in their students. And they really, really hated the show. But I got to know Jim and Gladys Nilsson, his wife, and Carl Wurzum, and they were hired to teach at Sac State. So for the next 6 or 7 years, Jim and Gladys were up in Sacramento, and so we kept in touch. And we even did another show years later called uh, Surplus Slop from the Windy City, which included not only Harry Hood people but people from the False Image group. Uh, and later, Jim, Gladys, and I shared a lot of interest in folk art, primitive art, etc. And so Jim and I worked on a show in the Emanuel Walter Gallery. I think it was probably 71 of American folk art. And Jim had a contact through Sac State, the man who uh, uh, was teaching Martin Ramirez at the Ione facility. It was a mental hospital at the time, and so we showed a whole bunch of Martin Ramirez drawings and Joseph Yoakum drawings and a lot of other stuff. And it was an impressive show. There was a lot of work in the show, and people really enjoyed that. This is a picture of, I guess, the Harry Who opening. Uh,
Yeah, I think it is. And it
yeah,
shows, you can see Wally Hedrick and Mike Henderson there too.
yeah. And the woman to the left, I think was Gloria. She was the PR lady. And I can't recognize many of the others. Harold
Spoken.
Schlosshauer, I think. Here's the conference room with the J. DeFeo painting that was being stored. It was delivered to the museum, to the gallery, um, on a truck designed to deliver printing presses to large facilities. And it was a very heavy thing. It weighed close to 3,000 pounds with all the packing and all that. And they installed it on the wall and had a conservator come and cover the whole thing with plaster and chicken wire to keep it from sort of avalanching because the weight of the pigment was starting to head toward the floor. But it was in the room for quite a few years. It was finally restored and is now at the Whitney. It's in the collection of the Whitney Museum of American Art. Just the conference room.
This shows, actually, if you can go back one, I have the questions about this because this is the jury for the 1971 Centennial Show. And this
Oh
is in
boy.
November of 1970. And it shows there were people there who did photography. And it was a show that was at the De Young, at SF MoMA, and at the Art Institute.
Oh,
And it shows two of the jurors there. It shows three jurors, actually. I think that's Brett West on far left with his sunglasses
yeah,
on.
and I think
But the other
that
two are,
I think that's Richard Diebenkorn and
and Walter
either
Hobbs.
Walter Hops. Yeah.
And what's ironic is Walter Hobbs is sitting there by Jay's painting, The Rose, which he was the one who showed it down or made sure it came to Pasadena to be shown there
Uh-huh.
for the first
Yeah.
time.
That was an ordeal. It was the 100th anniversary, 1971, and so it was big. The San Francisco Museum of Art was going to show the paintings. The De Young was going to show sculpture. Uh, the Legion, no, the Legion was going to show sculpture. Uh, we were going to show photography, and there was one other place I can't even remember right now. But anyhow, it was a huge exhibition, and we were given the entire upstairs at Fort Mason. They were just developing Fort Mason, and we got something like 17,000 entries. This was not done with slides. This was done with the actual work. And I had to hire a crew to handle everything. And so there were 17,000 works of art in these upstairs facility. Downstairs was filled with trucks and cars and automobiles confiscated by the feds, things that had been smuggling dope in from Mexico, boats and so on. Anyhow, for each of the sections, we invited two people. For painting, it was Walter Hopps and Richard Diebenkorn. For sculpture, it was Maurice Tuckman and Carl Andre. For prints, I think it was Joe Miller and maybe Nathan Olivera. I can't quite be sure. And for sculpture, it was Maurice Tuckman from the LA County Museum and Carl Andre. And things went pretty smoothly with Diebenkorn and Walter. And but for sculpture, uh, Carl Andre and Maurice Tuckman could not meet at the same day. So Tuckman came in first and he made his selections. And then a few days later, Carl Andre came. And as soon as he walked into the place, he said, I cannot judge anybody's work but my own. I accept it all. And there were something like, well, maybe 2,500 sculptures. And the deal was that any sculpture that was accepted was going to be shipped back at the Art Institute's expense, which would have been mighty because there were large things and it wouldn't have worked. And so we held a press conference. I guess this is the press conference. And we had to come up with a conclusion. So it was finally decided to show only the works that Maurice Tuckman selected, but put the names of all the sculptors entering in the catalog and with an explanation what happened. I think Bob Freed designed the catalog. He was uh, teaching printmaking at the Art Institute. And the artist community was enraged. They thought that Carl Andre just came out for the honorarium and the trip and all that. But that was not true. In fact, Carl gave me his check, uh, his honorarium check to use for the program, and he also he wandered around for 4 or 5 days. I was with him and Olive Aons, one of the students, and we were up day and night going to bars and stuff. And he went out to a construction project and picked up a bunch of materials, and he made two sculptures, one with some lengths of wood and another with lengths of a chain link fence. And he gave them to me and told me to send them to his dealer, Paula Cooper, and she would sell them and give the money to our program. Well, the artist committee was so enraged about this that they refused to accept the two sculptures. And every two or so I kept them, and every 2 or 3 years I would present them to a new artist committee, and they would still not accept them. Years later, I finally presented them to Dr. Shimshak, who was at the time the chairman of the board of the Institute, and he took them to New York and showed them to Paula Cooper, and Paula called Carl, and Carl disowned them. So I don't know what happened to them after that, but it was a real debacle. But it was a good show. It was a big show. All the usual suspects. Joan Brown and Manuel Larry and Wally Hedrick and all the people entered the show and were in the show, and it got lots of attention. Oh, this was a show that uh, Terry Fox and Terry had been living in Europe and working with Joseph Beuys and other people, and came to San Francisco and had a place on Rose Street, right by Zuni restaurant. And he and I decided on doing this show. And so we walked around San Francisco for a couple of weeks just looking for odd things. And for example, we went to the Lighthouse for the Blind and we acquired some sculptures made by the blind people. Uh, we got a lot of artists had strange things. For example, David Ireland had lived in Africa and had a bunch of strange African masks and things of that sort. Somebody else had a four-legged chicken, a taxidermied chicken. Uh, we had lightning rods from the Middle West and uh, a, a picture of an atomic bomb test smuggled out of the Lawrence Radiation Lab. And Roy DeForest had a bunch of voodoo sticks from Australia. It was just filled with strange objects. And we also built a string grid above the gallery, probably at the 12-foot uh, level, and it made kind of a shadows sprawling across the floor and the walls, but it also changed the acoustics, and it was really interesting. Um, and Robert Brum's band played for the opening, and we had a great time. It was a real fun show. So that was it. Terry was a great person. In all my experience at the Art Institute in those years, I think Terry was the most enigmatic and charismatic artist at the time, and he was really inspiring. I think David Ireland and Tom Marioni uh, were really influenced by him. So this is a picture of Richard Shaw and his wife Martha and and one of their friends uh, with the soapbox derby racer. The San Francisco Museum of Art hosted two soapbox derby races out by McLaren Park, and probably 40 or 50 artists were invited and were given a small stipend to buy materials and all. And they had this race, and it apparently raised a lot of money. And so some of us on the committee were able to make some acquisitions for the San Francisco Museum. We bought a Terry Fox sculpture for $3,500. I think a Joan Brown painting for 5,000, and Wally Hedrick's Here's Art Forum painting, something by Chris Camacho, but a lot of really good work for very little money. I think we had maybe $30,000 to spend, and got some really good deals. So this is Katie's department here.
Jeff, you're muted. Start again.
Oh, I'm sorry, Katie. So this now we'll jump forward, fast forward in time to Katie's era, and this is one of the exhibitions, which and of course there's always a headline in the newspaper that relates to one of the exhibitions, just like the controversy with Carl Andre. But take it away, Katie.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. And it's, an honor to be here with you and Phil. And thanks to the Artists Alumni group for the invite. I could talk about SFAI all day long, as you know, Jeff. So always happy to have an excuse. And it's wonderful to hear about Phil's experiences at the Institute. And it really is just wonderful to think about the sort of what feels different about these different eras in history, or what feels the same.
Yeah.
This was was an exhibition that I feel like had a lot of sort of spiritual parallels with some of the projects Phil might have worked on. This was with several, it was 5 artists. 3 of them were alums of SFAI, and that was Ruby Neary, Alicia McCarthy, and Barry McGee. And then Margaret Kilgallen and Chris Johansson didn't technically get degrees from SFAI, but they were absolutely students of SFAI and, part of the large expanded community of SFAI. And Natasha Boas curated an exhibition of their work called Energy That Is All Around. The poster or signboard, original signboards behind Jeff right now, you can see that Alicia and Ruby are making together in this newspaper image. This was a wonderful show, and it was really, I think a way to bring the history of SFAI alums back into the galleries where current generations of students could encounter it. And I was a young curator supporting the project and got to work with these incredible artists on site. They mostly did work overnight when we weren't around. So we'd come in the morning and things would be moved, new works would appear, works would vanish. And it was a really exciting project to work on. We toured it to the Gray Gallery at NYU as well. So it got to be experienced in New York City. There's the signboard. So yeah, Natasha curated it, and then Hesse and myself and Andrew McClintock were supporting staff, essentially.
And then you mentioned something, if you could go back one, Maria, if you mentioned how the spelling on the bottom was always.
Yeah. My name is partial but spelled correctly, and the others are not quite right, but close. Yeah, this was one of my first projects. I started at SFAI in 2012, I guess 2013. Is that right? Yeah, right before this, I worked on a show in this early part of 2013. So this was only my second project at the galleries.
And this next one, I thought you were still there for the Mike Henderson show in 20, when would it have been?
2019
or 18 or so, but I think you had just left maybe. So
yeah,
I had a Mike
I was
Henderson
not
show who was involved with all things SFAI and through that period from Phil to up to Katie too.
Mm-hmm. There he
Oh,
is.
and Mike playing, a typical opening at the Art
Yep.
Institute, on the roof with
Yeah.
with a good band and a good painter and a good filmmaker.
So this, yeah, we were sort of laughing that Phil and I are kind of bookends for the Walter and McBean galleries. And I started as a, gallery assistant or admin assistant. I don't think I had curator in my title at first, and slowly worked my way up till I was able to organize projects myself. And this was one of the last projects I worked on, which was with the Will Brown collective, Jordan Stein, David Kaspersak, and Lindsay White. They organized this project called Ether, which was a grant funded exhibition where they invested the exhibition funds into Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency, with the idea that any funds raised through that investment would be reinvested in student exhibitions at the Art Institute. And I thought it was just a really fascinating commentary on speculation in the art world, how we assign value to works of art or creative experiences, and as well as a commentary on the Institute itself, which was really struggling at this time financially, and I would say culturally, spiritually, really in a tough place. So I actually got laid off during this exhibition while in the planning phases. I was able to stay on as a contractor, but my full-time position was eliminated to add just, a poignant layer to the project and the fact that the gallery was really in a tough spot. We have a couple more images of this show. Oh, this was a town hall that the artists organized to really talk about, the exhibition as a starting point and a site for this chat, but really a chance for students to come and speak with the leadership of the school about what was going on with exhibition making and sort of other financial decisions at the school. Here's the opening night. And we had some archival materials in a vitrine, but otherwise the gallery was essentially empty. And there was a red light and a green light. And I forget the cadence, but I think it was like every 20 minutes, if Ethereum was up, a red light would glow and there would be a very upbeat, happy song that would play to sort of celebrate the fact that the investment was going up in value. But then if Ethereum went down, there would be a red light and a kind of womp womp song that would play. And so you had to hang out in the gallery to kind of experience in real time how the investment was doing. And ultimately, the school shut down before the funds from the investment could be put towards student exhibitions, and the artists decided to donate the proceeds to the new SFAI Legacy Foundation. It was our first large gift in support of the new foundation, which I helped found along with Jeff and several others. So that was another sort of full circle moment that I think I'm probably still processing, but it was such a generous like gesture of faith in what we were doing.
And it came at a very needed time too. So it was really interesting how, some of that seed money for our rent and moving expenses and everything else came from this crazy exhibition that really was a commentary, an artistic and art-filled commentary on contemporary and current events. It was very cool.
Absolutely. And it was, it wasn't an easy conversation to be having at that time. And there was some drama. Understandably, the school was in a tough spot, and these artists were really kind of highlighting that fact instead of pretending like everything was going to be just fine. And that attitude is controversial, I would say, in a lot of situations. So, but they persisted. We persisted. We believed in their vision, and I think it was a really successful project. Mm. And it led us to the next image several years later. So let's see, Ether was in 2018. So that checks out, Jeff, that I was laid off right before the Mike Henderson exhibition. So this last summer in 2025, fast forward, I'm running the fine art galleries at Hunter College in New York City. And I invited Lindsay White, who was one of the members of the Will Brown group, to curate an exhibition in our Tribeca gallery space. And she came up with this incredible project called Last Art School, which I think she would confirm that it very much was inspired out of her experiences at SFAI, as well as a book that she wrote and published with Culpa Press called What is Art?, where she interviewed other folks who had worked in art academia at universities around the country about their experiences, the challenges of working in art academia right now when free speech is under attack, funding is becoming more of a challenge than ever. There's competition, there's infighting, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a way for her to think through some of the ideas of that book with a visual iteration where she brought in artists who she knew from SFAI, from other schools that she worked with, other colleagues who had taught in art academia as well. And it was a really beautiful exhibition. I would add that the SFAI archive was also a really pivotal part of the exhibition. So we brought a lot of materials out from San Francisco to show and share with the New York City community, and to really highlight that it's a universal discussion that's not specific to the Bay Area. Then we can all come together and share ideas and strategies for what art education can look like in the future. This was the really sort of central hub of the exhibition, which was called the Chat and Chew Lounge. Lindsay served a free lunch every week from this cafe, along with the two curatorial fellows who you can actually see in the center of the image, seated at the table. We had an actual jukebox playing actual records that Lindsay helps curate that selection. And you can see some artworks on view here by Lindsay, Whitney Hubbs, and then there's some tiny Dewey Crumpler paintings on the right-hand wall that we were honored to show as well, since he was such an important faculty member at SFAI. But these works were all made kind of at the end of his time teaching at SFAI. So there's an example of colleagues of Lindsay's who were making work consciously or less consciously about sort of the inner turmoil that comes with working in art education these days. And, you know, she spoke to Dewey about those images, and he said it hadn't really occurred to him that they came out of that experience specifically, but, you know, I wish I had closer images, but you can look on the exhibition website for more. These figures with hoods and blackboards, and this feeling of, you know, maybe erasure is really present in this body of work. So it was a really incredible project to be a part of. This was also a very central piece in the exhibition. And here's our crossover back to the energy that is all around. This is a large Alicia McCarthy mural that she made in, what year did Fort Mason? Oh, 2017. So she created this mural for the new Fort Mason campus, which was maybe a misguided expansion of SFAI that happened around 2017. This is the campus and Pier 2 at Fort Mason. It was a beautiful space. It was the MFA studios for SFAI for a couple years, Jeff, I think. How long did it last?
I think it,
Yeah.
yeah, it sort
Maybe
of
three.
maybe three, maybe four. Well, maybe four.
Yeah, so Alicia's work was the first artwork to appear in this new campus for SFAI. It was a brand new mural on marine grade plywood that she created. It's one of her weaving paintings. And I paired it here with a quote that appears in Energy That Is All Around. We had an amazing archival display, and this was from a letter that I think was written to Alicia, or maybe it was more general, you know, complaining about how irrelevant graffiti art is. And
no, it was specifically to Ruby and Alicia.
It was to Ruby and
yeah,
Alicia.
And you know, you picked out a very mild portion of it too, because it goes on and on about how horrible their art was and how
I think there's like cussing in the letter. Like,
yeah,
it's not very professional,
and
but this person had a strong opinion about graffiti art.
We're so lucky that they hung on to this letter, and that you and Natasha and others made sure that got reproduced in the book, because Ruby had the original copy of it and it burned up in the fire in Altadena last year. So luckily it's still an extant as a digital image and as a beautiful photocopy. It's all wrinkled up that looks good too.
Wow.
And
yeah, there were
other. I was just going to say Alicia's mural, which was worked on by different people who were hanging around too, I think, at that time in at Fort Mason, was, as you noted, it being in your exhibition of Lindsay's stuff at Hunter, was retrieved from the Art Institute and got back to Alicia. So that was a very positive thing that happened.
That's right. It's back with Alicia.
Yeah.
Doug's asking who the dean was. I can't remember, Jeff.
Well, I can remember. It was Michael Grady, who probably would be very happy that he was involved and upset that he had done this at the time.
It was a different time, and it's pretty hilarious. There were other letters in the show around, you know, please don't sleep on campus. I'm pretty sure was an issue that came up over and over. So it was really special to include Alicia's mural. She loaned it to us for the Hunter exhibition, as really, you know, it had been a centerpiece of this essentially failed expansion at SFAI, and we brought it to Hunter as sort of I don't know, it felt like the jewel of the exhibition, but it was also kind of a warning, I think, for those of us who knew the full story. It was the first artwork to appear on Pier 2, and it was the last one to leave. So it really has this like heaviness to it, while also illustrating, to Jeff's point, you know, almost every line on this mural was done by different collaborators and friends of Alicia who got up on the scaffolding and did a spray paint line. So it's showing the expanded SFAI community while also kind of telling a sadder story.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's kind of, it gave us goosebumps when we opened it up in when it arrived in New York. And here's a little sample of the archive room that was part of the exhibition. There's our beloved Jeff. It says, Gunderson's the one. We don't need a president with a vision. We need stewardship, venerable institution. And there he is with the tower behind. So Lindsay wanted to kind of create an archival exhibition that felt curated and dynamic and a little mysterious. And it was wonderful to see people who didn't know the SFAI history kind of engage with some of the, wackier elements of our story. It was a blast. Yeah. So thanks to Jeff for making that happen. Jeff and Becky packaged up everything for us.
It was really fun. Becky and I had a great time doing this as an example of what the archives can do to help out artists and researchers and artist researchers. And we've been doing it ever since. So it's really been a blast from the archives to work with everybody. And, it's just evidence of how rich this archives is and how rich that history is of alumni that have, crossed through this place. And people are doing all this research into that period when Phil was doing those exhibitions during that, from the 60s into the 70s as well. Like, when you think of that conceptual show that was done, that precedes the information show, which is a benchmark that happened at the New York Museum of Modern Art, I think in 1970. And it precedes by 3 years the Documenta 5, which was one of the key exhibitions that started to involve conceptual artists. So, God, you guys.
Jeff, you were mentioning to early, I think before people joined, you were speaking about the DeYoung show a little bit, which to me sounded like one of those great moments where they're pulling material from that exact moment in history. Do you want to speak about that a bit?
Yeah, there's the DeYoung is going to do an exhibition based on the Art Institute from 1945 to 1969, which, like you two, bookmark really or bookend very interesting periods, with 1969 being the construction of the new wing by Pafford Clay. And that led to the expansion of the film department and the photography department and the gallery spaces and that new cafe and everything else. And a designated student gallery at that time, which was then anointed the Diego Rivera Gallery. But that exhibition will be in 2027, and they'll have a printed catalog for that. But again, it's this really great example of this community of artists that crossed through the Art Institute, and sometimes non-artists that were really important people that influenced and were influenced by those students that were at that place. So we should talk more about these things at some point. I hope some people have some questions in the chat or can pitch in. I'll be happy to ask plenty of them because I wonder how it was working with Lindsay in two different spots, Katie. Like those are two. That's really interesting. And Phil, you did that with Mike Henderson in different places too. So at different institutions with different administrations and pressures in different time periods, but working with the same people. So
I've got a short list of things I'd like to mention. For example, regarding the architecture of the building, back in '69, the architect didn't talk very much with the people who actually did the work in the building. They talked to the money people. And so I went very late in the game to lunch with Ted Elliott, the executive director, Fred Martin, Pafford Keating Clay, the architect, and me. We went to lunch at San Remo, and Pafford Clay asked me, "What kind of floor do you want?" And I said, "Well, I'd like a hardwood floor that can take just about anything because, somebody's going to come up with a ton of grease or whatever. He said, well, we're going to give you a polished concrete floor. Right. What kind of walls do you want? And I said, I want sheetrock walls backed by 3/4 inch plywood. He says, well, we're going to give you monk's cloth, which is kind of a, a burlap-like cloth that has a big weave, and you're supposed to put the nails or screws between the weave. Well, that lasted about a year because there was a vent up high and it started spewing black stuff on the monk's cloth within days. And secondly, for a faculty show, Bruce McGaw brought in a wet painting, a great big painting of the Art Institute floating in space upside down. And he dragged it across the monk's cloth and made a great big blue strip all the way across the monk's cloth. And so we tore down all the monk's cloth, and Steve Davis and Alec Lambie put up kind of a lumpy sheetrock wall. Um, the staff at the time was really great. Ted Elliott from the Elliott family from Boston was a uh, retired steamship executive, and he was a great, great executive for the Art Institute. The board consisted of people like Peter Folger, John Merrill, the architect, uh, Chauncey McKeever, uh, Mason Wells, and so on. All the business was taken care of at the University Club. And I was able to come along a couple of times to the University Club where they had little brown men in red jackets serving the drinks, remembering the drinks that all of the people had. But all the business was taken care of at lunch at the University Club. Um, Something about Mike, Mike grew up in Marshall, Missouri, and he applied to a number of art schools and wasn't uh, accepted in any except the Art Institute. And he was so shocked that he wrote back, I'm black. And I guess Fred Martin said, well, that's all right. You can you can come. And shortly after he arrived, he was on a cable car and there was an accident and he fell off and hurt himself. And he was taken to the general hospital. So board member Chauncey McKeever, who's a lawyer, found out about this and he pulled a few strings and found some money for Mike to buy his first camera. Got Mike for his injuries, so Mike got into filmmaking. Another big event was Other Sources. It was 1976, an exhibition we worked with Carlos Villa, and it was work by third world artists, and it was a big, big thing. The opening lasted 3 days, day and night. Leo Valador, Carlos's cousin, played the saxophone. At one point, I mean, the gallery was really crowded. And at one point, Ebony Levy, one of the Samoan artists, came up to me. He's a big guy. He's like 6.5 feet tall. And he gets me in a bear hug and says, Phil, I want you to turn all the lights in the gallery off except the one on my painting. And I slipped out from it. It was his grip and gave him some drink tickets. And that was that. Um, One time with Diego Rivera Gallery, I'd love to come to work. I mean, every morning I got up and it was just such fun to go there. And we had so much enthusiasm that we would do things on Saturdays, sometimes between shows, little pop-up shows. And Bruce Conner called me and asked if he could use the gallery one day. And I said, sure, what do you need? And he says, a table and a wall. And so he came with a bunch of prints, and he on the wall he put up a paint by numbers picture of the Last Supper, and on the table he put a big stack of prints, and these were prints that he had done down at Tamarind, June Wayne's place in L.A. And um, June was away, but he had to work with a German printer. And on the first day, he wanted the largest stone in the place and sat meditating it for half the day and then put his thumbprint on it and told the German printer to print it. The guy wasn't happy about that, but he printed it in several editions. And the second day, he wanted a smaller stone and was doing one of his squiggly things, and he canceled it and told the man to print it. The guy grumbled, but he printed it. The third day, he came in with this little thing that said reserved for June Wayne. It was her parking spot. And he wanted that printed in two colors. And the guy called June Wayne and she said, kick him out. So all these prints, each one cost about $65 to print. He brought to the Art Institute and he sold them for $5 a piece. And I bought the series of three, and students, Catherine Brown, all these people were buying these prints, and that was that. Another time, an encounter with Bruce Connor. Uh, this was really an ordeal. When oh, what's his name? After Fred Martin, what's the name of the guy that so the last director, the guy
Oh,
from Milwaukee, Minnesota, or whatever,
Arnold Hurston.
Arnold Hurston. Well, he showed up and wanted to do a big gala and fundraiser and so on. He also told the faculty that he was going to make everybody famous, and he was going to bring in all these international artists like Arnaldo Pomodoro and Daniel Sperry and so on and so forth. And the faculty said, well, yeah, over whose dead body? The faculty was making like 17,000 a year with no benefits whatsoever. And they thought these celebrities would come in and have dinner with the board, and that's that. So he commanded us to do a special exhibition. He got permission from iMagna's department store, which like 6 or 7 stories, and they wanted art in all of the rooms and all the windows. And we were given the window dressers gave us a little spot about maybe 6 by 10, and we were supposed to do everything before 6 in the morning or after closing. And I had to round up 195 works of art by 95 artists. Deben Korn and Sam Chikalian and all these people, we put their work in the windows, the store windows with mannequins. And other people uh, put stuff in every single gallery or every single room of iMagnums. And at one point, we put up a Chris Camacho in the first salon, and Chris came in to install it, and he came in no shirt, but he had a bib overalls with one strap over one shoulder and a six-pack of beer into the first salon. And the iMagnus people were sort of distressed, but they wouldn't say anything to me. They called the Art Institute, and then it went up the tree and then back to me, who I think Fred Martin said, "Get that guy out of there." But Bruce Connor gave us a big collage taken from nudist magazines, and of course they objected to that. And so Bruce took the thing back and put it on a stick, and he walked around iMagnums for the next few days holding that stick up, protesting. But it was a debacle. I mean, it came off well, but it was so much work. Also, there was the Adeline Kent series. Robert Boardman Howard, who had a studio down in Francisco, had been married to Adeline Kent, who died in their 50s. And so he funded a special Adeline Kent exhibition, which included a solo exhibition for a prominent artist and some stipend of some sort. And so each year we did that. And the ones I remember, Joan Brown did the Dancer series. Don Potts brought in some machinery that he had built. And there were several others, but every year we did a Adeline Kent show. Um, Things also changed. At the beginning, the board consisted of some of the people I mentioned, plus Nell Sinton, Sally Lilienthal, Ruth Armour, all the old timers, Frank Hamilton, Mason Wells. But over time, the composition of the board changed to younger people who were more interested in current things. And you finally got the impression that maybe some of them were rehearsing for board positions on the San Francisco Museum board, uh, because everything changed. Also, the composition of the artist committee changed. They were the people who supervised my doings. And at the beginning, some of the artist committee members were Ralph Ducasse, Peter Volkas, Nell Sinton, Ruth Armour, people like that. But later, a new generation of artists came in, younger artists who were much more ambitious and wanted me to get them on Art Forum magazine for some reason. I don't know how I could do that. Uh, Although at the time, uh, the Whitney Museum was sending people out to shop for the Whitney Annual. And first, Mac Doty, a curator from the Whitney, came out, and I would take them around to studios. And I had just bought a new Volkswagen, and we went to see Elmer Bischoff, who had a studio with Diebenkorn at the Volkswagen dealership building up above on Sadek. So we went, parked the car out in front, went upstairs, talked with Elmer, came back down. I got in my tan colored VW and I went, well, where's Mac? And he was sitting in another car in front of me, an identical car, and he was wondering where I was. Later, Marcia Tucker started coming out, and she and I got along pretty well. And so she would come out every year, and I would take her around. And one year we did something like 45 or 50 studio visits in maybe 5 days, from Sacramento all the way to San Jose, starting at 9 in the morning and ending up at 3 at night, 3 in the next morning. And she was shopping for the Whitney Annual, and I took her to see Sam Chakalian. And as you know, Sam couldn't keep his hands off some people. And going up the stairs to the studio, Sam pinched her on the ass. He pinched his way out of the Whitney Annuals. Marcia was a very early feminist, and she was livid. She was really, really livid. Um, but we had a lot of interesting talks. While driving, she would talk about her theory about the museum in the sky. I mean, this was before the new museum, and she had this idea to have a museum that hardly even had walls, or you'd have to put up walls each time, and all the staff would change. You'd be a director one month, and you'd be the custodian the next month, and the registrar the third month, and all these ideas that sounded great on paper but would never work. And so that was part of the thing. But I don't know. I took a leave of absence in '72 and went to Europe and lived in a little place in Italy and not far from Florence. And I bought a little car, a little Fiat, and I drove that thing everywhere. I drove to Sicily and to Yugoslavia and to Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Spain, Portugal. And I wanted to sell the car in Paris, but they were going to take a 30% tax. And so I drove the car at Christmas time through the Alps back to Torino to the factory. I was told that they would buy
Bill,
the.
I'm so sorry. I have to stop you just for a second because Katie has to head out
Oh, okay,
because
sure.
we are running out of time.
Okay,
But please stay here, Phil, if you have time to chat with
sure,
all the folks in the audience. But
sure.
just a quick thank you to Katie. I know you probably came to us in your lunch break, so thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jeff, so much for hosting the talk. I'm gonna stop the recording now, and then everyone can unmute themselves and open their windows so you can say hi to Phil and Katie. Just a minute. Thanks so much,
I'll stay to
everyone.
see everybody for